Sometimes, the most critical decisions of our lives come down to a matter of minutes. What if I told you that a 10-minute delay, a single moment of hesitation, could be the difference between life and death, between justice and a perfect crime? Today, I'm sharing a harrowing story that isn't mine, but one that chilled me to my core. The story of Martha, a retired nurse, and her fight to save her sister Diana from a plot more sinister than any medical diagnosis. This is a tale of betrayal hidden in a hospital room, of instinct overriding logic, and of a young nurse's courage that changed everything. Listen closely, because this story will make you question who you can truly trust. The call that upended Martha Reynolds' quiet retirement life came on a Tuesday morning. Her brother-in-law Richard's voice, usually so controlled, trembled on the line. Her younger sister Diana, her only family, her vibrant, laughing baby sister, had collapsed. A brain aneurysm, he said. She was on life support at St. Mary's. The doctors held little hope. Martha, a nurse for 4 decades before hanging up her scrubs, drove through the night from Ohio to Nashville. Her mind replayed memories. Raising Diana after their parents died. Walking her down the aisle to Richard 15 years ago. Richard, the successful investment banker who had given Diana everything. The big house, the security, the life of comfort. When she arrived at the ICU in the early hours, Richard was the picture of a grieving husband. Red-eyed, disheveled, collapsing into a hug. The doctors say there's no brain activity, Martha. She's gone. We need to let her go with dignity. He spoke of Diana's wishes, of not wanting to be a burden on machines. Numb with shock, Martha could only hold her sister's unnaturally still, warm hand and weep. For 2 days, she kept vigil in a haze of grief. But her nurse's intuition, honed over 40 years in the ER, began to prick at her. The attending physician, Dr. Carlson, was evasive, never meeting her eyes directly. Richard's push to sign the DNR order and comfort care papers felt urgent, almost eager. And then there was the woman, Cassidy. Young, impeccably dressed, appearing at odd hours to stand too close to Richard, to touch his arm with a familiarity that raised Martha's suspicions. A grief counselor assigned by the hospital, Richard explained. But something in their exchanged glances felt wrong. On Tuesday afternoon, Richard's call had a new, unsettling tone. Martha, it's time. The doctors agree. I have the papers. Please come now. Every instinct screamed danger, but shrouded in grief, she told herself she was just in denial. She walked into Diana's room at 3:30 p.m. Richard and Cassidy stood together, a united front. On the bedside table sat a stack of documents, a pen waiting atop them like a weapon. Richard launched into his rehearsed speech the moment Martha entered. Thank you for coming. The doctors have been clear. Diana is gone. These papers will let us remove the machines and let her pass in peace. He pointed to signature lines, talking rapidly, his finger tapping the pages. As her sister and proxy, you need to sign here, here, and here. Martha's hand moved toward the pen. It was an act of surrender to the inevitable. But just as her fingers were about to close around it, another hand, firm, trembling, closed around her wrist. She looked up into the wide, terrified eyes of a young nurse, her badge reading Jenkins. Don't sign anything, Nurse Jenkins whispered, her voice barely audible but laced with pure urgency. Please, just trust me. Richard's face flushed with instant anger. This is a private family matter, nurse. Richard had a new woman and needed his wife gone to fund their escape. They're keeping her in a drugged coma, Jenkins whispered. They need your signature to make her death look legal. Martha's nursing instincts snapped into focus, pushing the horror aside. This was a code blue of a different kind. We need proof. Real proof. And we need it before those 10 minutes are up. Martha walked back into Diana's room, her heart hammering against her ribs, but her face a mask of weary resignation. Years of calming frantic families in the ER served her well. Are you ready? Richard asked, that false sympathy plastered on his face. Almost, Martha said, picking up the papers again, playing for the precious time Jenkins needed. As a nurse, I have to be certain. I have questions. She began a meticulous, polite interrogation. She asked to see Diana's brain scans, the ones Richard claimed showed massive, unsurvivable hemorrhage. She questioned the timeline of Diana's collapse, noting Richard's hesitation when asked how long he waited before calling 911. She turned her questions to Cassidy, probing her non-existent grief counseling credentials with a gentle, deadly precision. With each query, Richard's patience frayed. His answers grew clipped, his face redder. Cassidy squeezed his hand, a gesture of solidarity that betrayed their true relationship. When Richard finally snapped, "Martha, are you going to sign or not?" he revealed his true priority. "The costs are mounting. Diana wouldn't want to drain her estate." Her estate. There it was. The financial motive laid bare. Martha looked at her sister, so still amidst the whirring machines. "I need 5 minutes alone with her," she said, letting her voice break with genuine emotion. "To say a proper goodbye. Then I'll sign." It was a request he couldn't deny. The moment they left, Martha rushed to Diana's bedside. "Hold on, baby girl," she whispered, clutching her sister's hand. And then she saw it, the faintest, most subtle flutter of an eyelid. A reflexive response to her voice. Jenkins was right. Diana was in there, fighting. The door opened, and Jenkins slipped in, a tablet in her hand. "Dr. Patel is with her now. He's furious. Her sedation levels are toxic." Her eyes were wide with a mixture of fear and triumph. "And Martha, we have the security footage." On the tablet screen, 72 hours of damning evidence played out. Richard adjusting 4 bags in the dead of night. Richard and Cassidy sharing passionate kisses in empty hallways. Richard handing a thick envelope to Dr. Carlson in the hospital parking garage. And most damning of all, footage from the morning of Diana's collapse. Time-stamped 8 a.m. Richard entering their bedroom with a syringe in hand. Diana asleep in their bed. 30 minutes later, Richard on the phone with 911, performing panic. "He injected her?" Martha breathed, the final piece of the horrific puzzle clicking into place. He hadn't just tried to finish the job in the hospital. He had started it in their home. "Security and police are on their way," Jenkins said. "But we have to keep him here." Martha walked out to the waiting area. Richard and Cassidy were huddled close, whispering. They sprang apart at her approach, but not fast enough. "I'm ready to sign," Martha announced, her voice hollow. Richard's face lit up with unconcealed triumph. He ushered her back into the room, Cassidy at his heels. Martha picked up the pen, held it poised over the signature line, and then she looked Richard dead in the eye. "Before I sign, Richard, one question. When did you start planning to kill my sister?" The room froze. The color drained from Richard's face. "Martha, the grief. It's making you irrational." "Is it?" Martha set the pen down with a definitive click. "Is it grief that shows you injecting Diana with something that morning? That you've been poisoning her here to keep her under? That you bribed her doctor to lie? You have no proof." Richard blustered, but his voice shook. Actually, a new, authoritative voice cut in. "We have a great deal of proof." Dr. Patel entered, followed by 2 police officers and hospital security. The room, once a stage for Richard's performance, became a courtroom. Dr. Patel detailed the medical fraud. The officers recited the charges. Attempted murder, conspiracy. The cold click of handcuffs replaced the sound of the heart monitor. As Richard and Cassidy were led away, one screaming about lawyers, the other sobbing, Dr. Patel turned to Martha. "Your sister is already responding to the reduced sedation. We have real hope." Martha's knees buckled. Jenkins was there to steady her, the brave young nurse who risked everything. "You saved her," Martha whispered. "First, do no harm," Jenkins replied softly, tears in her own eyes. In the sudden quiet of the room, Martha returned to her sister's side. Diana's hand felt different now. Not like the hand of the dying, but of someone sleeping on the cusp of waking. The battle was won, but the war for recovery was just beginning. And Martha would be there for every single moment of it. The 48 hours following Richard's arrest were the longest of Martha's life. She never left the hospital, trading the uncomfortable visitor's chair for short naps in the family lounge, always returning before the next scheduled neurological check. Dr. Patel had transferred Diana to a private room in the neurology wing, under his direct supervision and away from the toxic shadow of Dr. Carlson's corrupted care. Martha watched, her nurse's eye tracking every blip on the monitors, every slight change in her sister's vitals. The powerful sedatives that had held Diana captive were being carefully titrated down. It was a delicate process, too fast and she could seize, too slow and they risked further complications. Nurse Jenkins, now officially reassigned to Diana's case, became Martha's anchor. The young woman worked with a quiet, fierce dedication, her earlier fear replaced by a protective vigilance. She explained each step, each medication adjustment. Her brain needs to remember how to wake up on its own, Jenkins said softly during one of the long night shifts. It's like guiding someone out of a very deep, dark cave. On the second evening, as the sunset painted the room in oranges and purples, Martha was dozing in her chair, holding Diana's hand as she always did. A squeeze. Faint, but unmistakable. Martha's eyes flew open. Diana! Another squeeze. Then, the flutter of eyelids Martha had prayed for. Diana's eyes opened, unfocused at first, swimming in the haze of residual drugs and confusion. They wandered the ceiling, the machines, before slowly, landing on Martha's face. A blink, a flicker of recognition. Martha! The word was a dry, raspy whisper, barely more than an exhale, but it was the most beautiful sound Martha had ever heard. Tears she'd held back for days. Through the fear, the confrontation, the terror, finally broke free. I'm here, baby girl. I'm right here. You're safe. Diana's brow furrowed, the effort of thought visible. What happened? Her voice was weak, each word a struggle. Richard? Martha gently smoothed her sister's hair. That's a long story. The short version is, you're going to be okay. Richard won't be bothering us anymore. The process of waking up was not instantaneous. Diana drifted in and out of consciousness, her moments of lucidity growing longer each time. Dr. Patel was cautiously optimistic. The fact that she's responding to verbal commands, that she recognized you, these are excellent signs. The road to full recovery will be long. There may be memory gaps, weakness, possibly some lasting effects from the trauma and the sedation. But Martha, she has a fighting chance. A real one. It was more than Martha had allowed herself to hope for. Her sister was back. As Diana regained strength, the horrifying tapestry of Richard's betrayal was unraveled by detectives. With the security footage, Jenkins's photos, and Dr. Patel's medical testimony as a foundation, Richard and Cassidy's defenses crumbled. Detective Miller, a seasoned investigator with kind eyes, visited Martha and a now alert Diana to lay out the case. It was premeditated for months, he explained, his voice calm but grave. Richard met Cassidy Morrison at a financial conference over a year ago. The affair started shortly after. Your mention, Diana, of wanting to update your will to increase charitable donations appears to have been the trigger. He needed you gone before you could change it. The mechanics of the plot were chilling in their calculation. Richard had used his banking connections to research untraceable drugs. The morning injection was a cocktail designed to induce a catastrophic cerebrovascular event that would mimic a natural aneurysm. Dr. Carlson, drowning in gambling debts, had been an easy target for a $50,000 bribe to falsify brain death diagnoses and oversee the lethal sedation protocol in the ICU. Cassidy had already quit her job, Detective Miller continued. They had one-way tickets to Grand Cayman for the day after the life support was to be withdrawn. The $3 million from your life insurance policy was just the start. They had plans to liquidate everything. Diana listened, her face pale but set in a hard, unreadable expression. The man she had loved and trusted for 15 years had not only wanted her dead but had meticulously planned to profit from her murder. And the hospital? She asked, her voice stronger now, laced with a cold anger. Dr. Carlson has been arrested and will lose his license. The hospital administration is cooperating fully. Nurse Jenkins is being hailed as a hero, the detective said, offering a small, respectful nod to Martha. Your sister's instincts, and that nurse's courage, are what broke this entire thing open. Later, alone with Martha, Diana finally let the mask fall. She cried. Not the soft tears of a victim, but the rage-filled, gut-wrenching sobs of someone profoundly violated. Martha held her, saying nothing, just letting the storm pass. When the tears subsided, Diana looked up, her eyes red but clear. I want to see him, she said, her voice steel. Before the trial. I need to look him in the eye. Martha nodded. She understood. This was no longer about grief. It was about reclaiming power. The meeting took place in a stark, secure visitation room at the county jail. Richard, in an orange jumpsuit, looked smaller, diminished without his expensive suits and air of authority. When Diana entered, leaning slightly on Martha's arm but walking under her own power, his face contorted with a mixture of shock and panic. Diana, you look, he stammered. Alive. Diana finished for him, her voice steady. She sat down, never breaking eye contact. Thanks to my sister and a nurse with a conscience. Richard launched into a frantic, rambling monologue. It was Cassidy's idea, he claimed. She seduced him, manipulated him. He was weak, he was sorry, he never meant for it to go this far. He begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain. Diana listened in silence until he ran out of breath. The room was quiet save for the hum of the fluorescent lights. When you injected me, Diana said, her voice so calm it was unnerving, did you think about our wedding day? About promising to love and protect me? Or were you just thinking about the bank transfer to the Cayman Islands? Richard's mouth opened and closed, no sound coming out. I don't want your apology, Richard. I don't want your excuses. I just needed you to see me. To see that I survived you. She leaned forward slightly. You thought I was worth more dead. But you were wrong. I'm going to live a life so full, so rich, that the memory of you will be nothing but a faint, ugly stain that I chose to wash away. You get to sit in this cell and rot knowing you failed. She stood up, not waiting for a response. Martha stood with her, a solid, silent pillar of support. As they turned to leave, Diana paused at the door and looked back one last time. Enjoy your life insurance, Richard. It's the last penny of mine you'll ever see. Walking out of the jail into the bright sunlight felt like stepping out of a tomb. Diana took a deep, shuddering breath, as if expelling the last of the poisoned air from her lungs. Now, she said, linking her arm through Martha's. Let's go live. The legal proceedings that followed were swift. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Richard Thornton and Cassidy Morrison pled guilty to attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder, receiving sentences of 25 years to life. Dr. Carlson pled to fraud and conspiracy, losing his medical license and facing substantial prison time. Diana's divorce was finalized, granting her every asset, every penny, free and clear. But the true victory was measured in smaller, sweeter moments. Diana taking her first unassisted steps down the hospital corridor. Her laughter returning, tentative at first, then full and real. The day she finally went home, not to the mansion she'd shared with Richard, but to Martha's spare room, where she felt safe. One afternoon, Diana handed Martha a brochure. It was for a small, family-run hotel in Positano, Italy, overlooking the Mediterranean. I think, Diana said, a genuine smile touching her eyes for the first time in months. It's time for that trip. Martha smiled back. I'll start packing. Diana's physical recovery was a marathon, not a sprint. The neurological damage from both the induced stroke and the prolonged heavy sedation manifested in ways that required immense patience. There was the slight limp in her left leg, a persistent reminder that her motor pathways had been assaulted. There were the frustrating gaps in her short-term memory, where she would forget why she had walked into a room or struggle to recall a conversation from the previous day. Sometimes, a word would dance on the tip of her tongue, elusive and maddening. But if her body and mind were healing in fits and starts, her spirit was undergoing a more profound transformation. The initial shock and rage gave way to a steely resolve. She attended physical therapy 3 times a week, her face a mask of concentration as she repeated tedious exercises to retrain her muscles. Martha was her constant companion, her cheerleader, the spotter who was always there to catch her if she stumbled. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling session, Diana sat on a bench in the hospital's rehabilitation garden, massaging her aching leg. "You know," she said to Martha, her voice quiet but clear, "for years, my identity was Richard's wife, the hostess of his parties, the caretaker of his home, the attractive accessory to his successful life. When that was violently ripped away, I thought there would be nothing left. Just a hollow woman with a broken brain." Martha stayed silent, letting her sister speak into the quiet space between them. "But I'm starting to realize," Diana continued, looking at her own hands, "that what he tried to destroy was just a shell. The core of me, the stubborn little sister who followed you everywhere, the woman who dreamed of Italy, the person who is fighting to walk again, he couldn't touch that. In a twisted way, he set me free. I get to decide who Diana is now. Not a wife, not a victim, just me." This newfound sense of self extended to practical matters. With Martha's help and a sharp lawyer, Diana began the arduous process of untangling her financial life from Richard's. It was a forensic accounting of betrayal. They discovered hidden accounts, secret credit cards used to fund Cassidy's lifestyle, and multiple large withdrawals in the months leading up to the attack. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but Diana met them with cold detachment. "Add it to the evidence pile," she'd say, her voice devoid of emotion. She was building a fortress of facts around her pain. Meanwhile, Nurse Jenkins's life had also changed. Hailed as a hero by the hospital administration, who were desperate for positive PR after the Carlson scandal, she was offered a promotion and a scholarship for an advanced nursing degree. But during a visit to Martha's home, she confessed her ambivalence. "I didn't do it for awards," she told Diana and Martha over tea. "I did it because it was right. Now everyone wants to shake my hand, but all I can think about is how close we came. How the system almost failed because a doctor had debts and a man had greed." Diana reached across the table and took Jenkins's hand. "You didn't just save my life," she said. "You saved my faith. In people, in decency. That's a gift I can never repay. But your scholarship fund is a start." As the weeks turned into a month, Diana's firsts began to accumulate. Small victories that felt monumental. Her first unassisted walk to the mailbox. Her first home-cooked meal, a simple pasta that she and Martha made together, laughing when they accidentally used salt instead of sugar. Her first night sleeping through without nightmares of syringes and beeping machines. Then came the day she received the official court documents. Richard and Cassidy, following their guilty pleas, were sentenced. The newspaper article was brief and clinical. Former investment banker Richard Thornton, 55, and accomplice Cassidy Morrison, 32, were sentenced today. Diana read it once, then carefully folded the paper and placed it in the fireplace. She struck a match and watched the words that had defined her nightmare curl into black ash. She didn't feel triumph. She felt a quiet, final closure. "Goodbye, Richard," she whispered to the flames, and she meant it in every sense. The idea for Italy began as a joke, a fantasy whispered during difficult therapy sessions. "Just think of the lemon trees, Diana," Martha would say, "and the sea that's so blue it doesn't look real." It was a mental escape hatch. But as Diana grew stronger, the fantasy solidified into a plan, and the plan into book tickets. They invited Nurse Jenkins, insisting she was not a guest but family, an essential part of their story. The journey itself was a testament to how far Diana had come. Navigating the airport, managing her carry-on, handling the long flight, all tasks that would have been unthinkable months before. When the plane descended towards Naples, banking over the Tyrrhenian Sea, Diana pressed her forehead to the window. The coastline unfolded below, a dramatic tapestry of cliffs, pastel-colored villages clinging to mountainsides, and that impossible, heart-stopping blue water. Their home for 2 weeks was a small, family-run pensione in Positano, its terraced garden overflowing with bougainvillea and the scent of jasmine. From their balcony, they had a postcard-perfect view of the iconic stacked houses tumbling down to the sea, the dome of the Church of Santa Maria Assunta gleaming in the center. The first morning, Diana woke at dawn. She slipped out quietly, leaving Martha and Jenkins sleeping. With her cane for support, she walked down the steep, narrow path to the Spiaggia Grande, the main beach. The world was soft and silent, painted in the pearly grays and pinks of pre-sunrise. The Mediterranean lapped gently at the shore. She stood there, breathing in the salt air, feeling the cool sand between her toes. This was the dream. Not the specific location, but the freedom to be in it. To stand on a beach in Italy because she chose to, because she was alive to do so. A tear traced a warm path down her cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sadness. It was an overflow of a feeling so vast she had no name for it. Gratitude, awe, vindication, life. Over the following days, they fell into a blissful rhythm. Mornings were for exploration. They took a boat along the Amalfi coast, gasping at the beauty of hidden coves. They visited the ruins of Pompeii, where Diana walked the ancient streets with a sense of kinship for things that had survived catastrophe. They got hopelessly lost in the labyrinthine alleys of Ravello, ending up at a tiny cafe where they ate the best lemon gelato of their lives. Afternoons were for stillness. Jenkins, who had never taken a real vacation, learned the art of the siesta. Martha devoured novels in the shade, and Diana would sit on the balcony, sketching in a notebook. Not the landscapes, but abstract shapes and patterns that represented how she felt. Swirling lines for confusion, solid blocks for strength, delicate webs for the new connections in her life. One evening, as they sat at a cliffside restaurant watching the sunset melt the sky into shades of gold and fire orange, Diana raised her glass of Prosecco. To second chances, she said, her voice steady and sure. To listening to your gut, Martha added, clinking her glass. To doing the right thing, even when it's terrifying, Jenkins finished, her smile brighter than the setting sun. They ate seafood pasta and laughed about their misadventures. They talked about the future. Jenkins was considering the advanced degree. Martha was thinking of writing a memoir, not for publication, but for her own grandchildren. And Diana? Diana was just beginning to imagine her possibilities. Maybe she'd volunteer. Maybe she'd take an art class. Maybe she'd travel more. The beautiful, terrifying truth was that the page was blank, and the pen was finally in her hand. On their last night, Diana had one more item on her mental checklist. She asked the waiter to take a photo of the three of them. In the picture, they are squished together, smiling broadly, the darkening Mediterranean and the first stars behind them. Diana is in the center, standing without her cane for the shot, one arm around each of her companions. She is not just surviving in that photo. She is radiant. It is the portrait of a woman who has walked through fire, found her people in the ashes, and emerged, not just intact, but remade. The 10-minute warning from a brave nurse had set all of this in motion. It had led to this moment of perfect, hard-won peace under an Italian sky. As Diana looked at the photo later, she understood that the greatest revenge against those who tried to diminish her was not hatred, but this, a life lived fully, joyfully, and free. And that was a victory no one could ever take from her. The return from Italy was not a return to normalcy, because normal had been incinerated in the fire of betrayal. They landed not at Diana's sprawling suburban mansion, now an empty, echoing crime scene in her mind, but at Martha's modest, lived-in home in Ohio. The contrast was stark, from the dizzying beauty of the Amalfi Coast to the quiet, predictable streets of Martha's neighborhood. But for Diana, Martha's spare bedroom, with its faded floral wallpaper and the faint scent of her sister's lavender sachets, felt more like a sanctuary than any luxury estate ever had. The physical reminders of her ordeal were becoming manageable. The limp was now more of a slight hesitation in her step, noticeable only to those who knew to look. The memory lapses were fewer, often triggered only by extreme fatigue. But the psychological and emotional scars ran deeper, revealing themselves in unexpected ways. It began with the mail. One afternoon, a week after their return, a plain envelope arrived from the county clerk's office. It contained the final, official divorce decree. Diana held the paper, the legal language cold and impersonal. The marriage between Diana Marie Thornton and Richard James Thornton is hereby dissolved. She read it 3 times, waiting for a feeling, triumph, sadness, relief, something. But there was only a hollow numbness. The document felt as relevant as a grocery receipt from 5 years ago. The man she had vowed to spend her life with was now just a name on a page, a case number in the penal system. Later that night, she stood in the shower, the hot water cascading over her. She looked at her body in the foggy mirror. The same body Richard had once claimed to adore, the same body he had tried to systematically destroy. She traced the small scar on her arm from an 4-line that had been infiltrated with excessive sedatives. It was a physical testament to his attempt. But as she stood there, a strange realization dawned on her. She no longer felt like his victim. The body she saw was hers. It had carried her through the attack, through the coma, through the painful rehab. It had walked the streets of Positano. It was strong. It was hers. The next challenge was financial independence. The settlement from the divorce had left her comfortably well off, but wealth felt like an abstract concept, numbers in bank accounts that had once been joint. Richard had always handled their finances, investments, taxes, bills. Diana had known the passwords but not the strategies. Now, she asked Martha to sit with her at the kitchen table. A laptop open, bank statements spread out like a patience chart. "I feel like I'm learning a new language," Diana confessed, frustration lining her voice as she tried to decipher stock portfolios. Martha, ever practical, put a hand over hers. "You learn to walk again. You can learn this, one step at a time." And she did. With the same dogged determination she'd applied to physical therapy, Diana began to educate herself. She met with a financial advisor, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Gloria who reminded her of her toughest nursing instructor. Gloria didn't coddle her. "This is your money," she said, tapping the balance sheet. "Your security, your future. You need to own it, understand it, control it." Diana left those meetings mentally exhausted but empowered. Meanwhile, her relationship with her own identity continued to evolve. One rainy Tuesday, she found herself in front of the hall closet in Martha's home, holding the few boxes of her belongings that had been retrieved from the mansion. She opened one. Inside were photo albums. She sat on the floor and began to flip through them. There she was, younger, laughing with Richard at various parties, on vacations, at holidays. The perfect couple. But now, with her new eyes, she saw the subtle tensions she had once ignored. Richard's hand possessively on her arm, not in affection but in control. Her own smile not quite reaching her eyes in pictures taken during the last year of their marriage. She didn't burn them. Instead, she carefully removed each photo of herself, placing them in a new, empty album. The photos of Richard, of them as a couple, she placed back in the old album and closed it. She carried that old album out to the recycling bin and dropped it in. It wasn't an act of rage. It was an act of curation. She was editing her own history, choosing what to keep and what to discard. That evening, she made dinner for Martha and Jenkins, who was visiting for the weekend. As they ate, Diana said quietly, "I think I want to go back to school." Martha looked up, surprised. "For what?" "I don't know yet," Diana admitted. "Maybe art history, maybe counseling, maybe just learning for the sake of learning. I spent so many years being what Richard needed me to be. I want to find out what Diana wants to be." Jenkins smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I think that's the best prescription I've heard all year." The journey inward, Diana was discovering, was as complex and demanding as the journey of physical recovery. But for the first time since she woke up in that hospital bed, she wasn't walking it because she had to. She was walking it because she wanted to, and that made all the difference. Heroism, Diana was learning, has long and unpredictable shadows. For Nurse Jenkins, The aftermath of her courageous act was a double-edged sword. The hospital administration, eager to capitalize on a positive narrative, had launched an Integrity in Nursing campaign with Jenkins as its reluctant poster child. Her face smiled from brochures and internal newsletters. She was given a substantial raise and the promised promotion to charge nurse of the ICU step-down unit. But the spotlight was uncomfortable. Some of her colleagues treated her with newfound respect, but others, particularly those who had been close to the disgraced Dr. Carlson, regarded her with cold resentment. Whispers followed her in the break room. "She's the one who got Carlson fired. Just looking for attention. Think she's better than us now." The solidarity she had once felt on her shift was fractured. She confessed this to Diana and Martha during one of their now regular weekly video calls. "I just wanted to do the right thing," Jenkins said, her face pale on the laptop screen. "I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted your sister to live. Now I feel like I'm wearing a costume every day I go to work." Diana listened, her heart aching for the young woman who had saved her. "The people who matter know the truth," she said firmly. "You didn't just save me, Chloe. You saved the next patient Dr. Carlson might have harmed. You saved the integrity of that entire hospital wing. The whispers are the noise of small people. Don't let them drown out the truth of what you did." Inspired, Diana decided to take more concrete action. She established the Chloe Jenkins Courage in Nursing Scholarship at the local university's nursing school, funding it generously. But she didn't stop there. She worked with the university to design a supplementary ethics course, one that used her own case study, anonymized, to teach aspiring nurses about moral courage, institutional pressure, and patient advocacy. She even agreed to speak at the first seminar not as a victim, but as a partner in education. The day of the seminar arrived. Diana stood at the podium in a university lecture hall, looking out at 50 bright-eyed nursing students in scrubs. Martha sat in the front row, beaming. Jenkins, invited as a guest of honor, sat beside her, looking nervous. "Good morning," Diana began, her voice clear in the quiet room. "My name is Diana, and I am alive today because of a nurse who saw something wrong and refused to stay silent." She didn't delve into the sordid details of Richard's plot. Instead, she focused on the moments that mattered. The 10-minute warning, the shaky photos on a phone, the fear in a young nurse's eyes that was overridden by a greater commitment to her oath. "When you are in that hospital room," Diana told the captivated students, "you are not just a caregiver. You are a witness. You are the last line of defense for the most vulnerable person in that room. Your eyes, your instincts, your courage, they are medical instruments as vital as any stethoscope or monitor. The nurse who saved me didn't have a fancy title or years of experience. She had integrity. And that," she said, locking eyes with Jenkins, "is the most powerful medicine of all." The applause was thunderous. Afterward, students surrounded Jenkins, asking questions not about scandal, but about strength. For the first time, Jenkins began to see her actions not as a source of isolation, but as a source of inspiration. The weight of the unwanted heroism began to transform into a sense of purpose. Back at Martha's home, the three women celebrated with takeout Chinese food. "You were amazing today," Martha told Diana, squeezing her hand. "I just told the truth," Diana shrugged. "It's more than that," Jenkins said. "You gave it meaning. You made our story into something that can help other people. That makes everything we went through feel worth it." Diana nodded. That was it, exactly. The trauma had been senseless, a cruel act of greed. But their response to it, the fight, the recovery, the healing, and now this act of turning pain into purpose, that was where meaning was forged. The attack had been a period of brutal darkness, but they were now using the experience to light a path for others. A few weeks later, Diana received an email. It was from a woman in another state. Her subject line read, 2 years had folded gently over the trauma, softening its sharp edges without erasing its memory. The rhythm of life at Martha's Ohio home had become a comfortable, healing cadence. Diana's physical recovery had plateaued into a new normal. A slight, almost elegant hesitation in her left step that she'd learned to move with, not against. The memory lapses were now rare guests, visiting only during extreme fatigue. But the most profound healing was invisible, woven into the fabric of her spirit. The scholarship fund in Nurse Jenkins' name had become a living legacy. What began as a single annual award had grown, through Diana's careful stewardship and additional fundraising, into an endowment supporting 3 nursing students each year, with a mandatory ethics seminar series that Diana herself helped design. She had found an unexpected calling in this work. Sitting on the selection committee, reading essays from bright-eyed students who spoke of moral courage and patient advocacy, she felt a deep sense of purpose. She was turning her nightmare into someone else's guiding light. Jenkins, now Chloe to both sisters, had navigated the awkward hero worship at the hospital and emerged stronger. She'd earned the respect of her peers not through headlines, but through consistent, excellent care. The promotion to charge nurse had stuck, and she wore the responsibility with a quiet confidence that had replaced her earlier anxiety. She visited Ohio every few months, and her presence in Martha's home had evolved from that of a heroic stranger to a beloved, extended family member. One crisp October morning, the kind where the air smells of wood smoke and decaying leaves, Diana sat at Martha's kitchen table with a different kind of document spread before her. Not medical reports or legal papers, but architectural plans and real estate listings. Martha, entering with a basket of freshly picked apples from the backyard tree, paused. House hunting. Diana looked up, a serene smile on her face. I think it's time. Not to leave you, she added quickly, seeing the flicker in Martha's eyes, but to build something of my own. Something that's just mine. From the ground up. She showed Martha the listings. Not grand estates, but cozy cottages. One, in particular, caught Martha's eye. A small cedar-shingled house on a bluff in Bar Harbor, Maine, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Atlantic. It has a guest room with its own entrance, Diana said softly. For you. Always. Martha felt a complex swell of emotion. Pride at Diana's independence, a bittersweet ache at the thought of an emptier house, but overwhelming joy at seeing her sister not just recovered, but reborn. It's perfect, she whispered, her voice thick. The process of buying the house became Diana's next act of reclamation. She negotiated the price herself. She worked with the architect on modifications, wider doorways, a railing on the bluff path, a kitchen designed for someone who loved to cook but needed efficiency. Every decision was hers alone, made with a clear-eyed confidence that would have been unimaginable in her previous life. As the closing date approached, Diana organized one last gathering in Ohio. Chloe flew in, and the 3 women spent a weekend doing nothing in particular and everything important. They baked an apple pie from Martha's tree. They watched old movies under a shared blanket. They took a long walk through the rust-colored woods, Diana's cane tapping a steady rhythm on the fallen leaves. On the last night, sitting on the back porch under a blanket of stars, Chloe broke the comfortable silence. Do you ever think about him? Richard. Diana was quiet for so long Martha wondered if she'd heard. Then she spoke, her voice calm as the night air. I think about the person I was when I was with him. She feels like a character in a book I read long ago. I remember her story. I feel for her. But she's not me anymore. Richard. He's a footnote in that book. A villain in a single chapter. But the story kept going. She turned to look at both of them, her face illuminated by the soft porch light. You two helped me write the next chapters. The best ones. The move to Maine was not an escape, but an arrival. Diana's new home, which she'd christened Bluff House, stood as a physical manifesto of her survival. Every piece of furniture was chosen not for show, but for comfort. Every piece of art on the wall spoke to her. Seascapes that mirrored her own turbulent journey to calm. Abstract pieces in resilient blues and golds. The guest room for Martha was already decorated in her favorite shades of green. On a brilliant May morning, with the Atlantic sparkling like crushed diamonds below, Diana hosted her first proper gathering. Martha had been there for a week helping her settle. Chloe had driven up from the city. The 3 women sat on the wide deck, a breakfast of fresh berries, pastries from the local bakery, and strong coffee between them. The conversation meandered from Chloe's latest challenging case at the hospital, to Martha's garden back in Ohio, to Diana's plans to volunteer at the local Marine Conservation Society. It was ordinary. It was peaceful. It was everything. As the sun climbed higher, Diana stood and walked to the deck railing, leaning on it lightly. She looked out at the endless horizon where sea met sky in a seamless line. "I used to think that justice was seeing him punished," she said, not turning around. "And that was part of it. But I've come to realize that true justice is this." She gestured to the house, the view, the two women behind her. "It's building a life so beautiful, so full, that the memory of what he tried to do becomes small and distant. It's waking up every morning in a house that holds only my choices. It's breathing this air because I fought to breathe at all." Martha came to stand beside her, slipping an arm around her waist. Chloe joined them on the other side. "10 minutes," Martha said softly, echoing the phrase that had become their private shorthand for destiny. "That's all it was. 10 minutes of a brave nurse's courage. 10 minutes of your trust," Chloe corrected. 10 minutes that gave me a lifetime," Diana finished. They stood in a silent trio, bound by a story that had begun in a sterile hospital room of betrayal and ended on a sun-drenched bluff of hard-won peace. The journey had been through hell, but they had carried each other out of the fire. Diana's scars, both visible and invisible, were no longer wounds. They were proof of her resilience, proof of the love that had saved her, proof that even the most carefully laid plans of evil could be undone by ordinary courage. She had not just survived. She had reclaimed her life, redesigned it on her own terms, and filled it with meaning. And as she stood between her sister and her friend, watching the gulls wheel against the vast blue, Diana Marie Thornton, divorcee, survivor, advocate, homeowner, knew with absolute certainty that she had won. To everyone who has followed this harrowing journey of Martha and Diana, thank you for listening. If this story of courage, intuition, and the unbreakable bond of sisterhood moved you, please let us know. Hit that like button to support our channel. Share this story with someone who might need to hear about the power of trusting your gut. And most importantly, tell us in the comments below. Have you ever had a moment where a few minutes made all the difference? Your engagement helps us bring more powerful, true stories to light. If you want to hear more narratives that explore the depths of human resilience and the triumph of good over evil, make sure you subscribe to Heartland Stories and ring that notification bell. We upload new heart-touching stories every week. And for you right now, don't go anywhere. The video you see on your screen is our next story, one we think you'll connect with deeply. Give it a watch. Until next time, remember, always listen to that inner voice. It might just be the whisper that saves a life.